Hi, everybody. Welcome to National Apprenticeship Week 2022. And joining us again from last year, he graced us with his presence last year, is Luke Bendall from Direct Line Group. Luke, it's absolutely amazing to see you again. 1 year on. You haven't aged a day.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well. Thank you.
So, Luke, would you like to introduce yourself? Perhaps tell us a bit about what you're doing currently at the moment, what position you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Luke Bendall. I'm 22 years old. I work for Direct Line Group, where I've worked for the past 5 and a bit years, done 2 apprenticeships. My current title is Technology Tooling Analyst. It's very non-descriptive, like most job titles. A lot of them are a little bit fluff. Lots of job roles that sound similar, but have lots of different responsibilities. I basically speak to different stakeholders with interests in different platforms and stuff to understand what they want, translate it into technical documentation, process flows, and then work with developers to get it built, and things like that. That really is a quick summary.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So there's 2 things I want to pick up on what you just said. And first things first, some students and teachers watching this will think Direct Line Group. I've only heard that term with regards to insurance, and for people of my age, they're thinking of the little red phone on the adverts.
Yeah.
So is it the same company? Is it a different company? Are they related?
Yeah, so Direct Line Group is basically the parent company which owns Direct Line, Churchill, Prudential, Privilege, Green Flag, and a number of other big brands that you'll probably recognise. Another one I think is Darwin. Is a relatively new one on sort of price comparison websites. So yes, it's all the same company. It's basically like the parent company that owns all the brands.
Right, that's interesting. So you youngsters watching, when you see something maybe on an advert on a TV, it's quite likely that's just one product or one brand under an umbrella of a whole load of things. So when Luke introduced himself and said Direct Line Group, perhaps you only ever thought about insurance, but there's other things there, but we'll probably come to in a minute, Luke. But the other thing I want to pick up is that you're making me feel old by telling me that you're only 22, but you said you've been doing an apprenticeship for so long. That's going to take us back to basically you leaving school at 16 and then starting an apprenticeship. Is that right?
Yeah. So I left school at, it must have been 16 in whenever it was, 2016, around about then. And I went to Suffolk 1 for a couple of months and just didn't really, college just didn't get on me. I felt like I wanted to be just learning on the job and perhaps earning a bit of money rather than going into college and worrying about homework and everything else. So after being at college for maybe a month or 2, I decided to start looking at apprenticeships on the government website, and then ended up stumbling across the Direct Line one. And the funny thing was, my mum thought, you probably won't get that because it was a relatively high salary for an apprenticeship. I think it was like 16,000 or so was the starting salary, which is fair for it was like 35, 37-hour contract. It's not too bad. But it's good for apprenticeships. So I applied for it, not thinking, I thought, may as well give it a shot. What do I have to lose, really? And then ended up getting a call from, I think it was West Suffolk College that were managing the sort of hiring of it. Had some conversations with them, and then had an interview. And then, in November of 2016, I started that apprenticeship. And then from there, moved on to a second apprenticeship after some sort of networking within the company, and moved from Ipswich to Bromley. And I've stayed in Bromley since. In fact, I've very recently just agreed to buy my first flat here. So
wow,
everything
congratulations.
Going to plan, really.
Wow, and that is incredible. So you're 22. You chose to drop out of college to start this apprenticeship, and you've progressed up the ladder to a point where, in a very, very competitive housing market, basically, young people, what that means is that they're very expensive.
Yeah.
You managed to get on the housing. That's amazing. So, and you're a local lad then. So you said you're Ipswich. So that will resonate with a lot of us here. Okay. So let's just map this out. So first things first, the message that we're hearing here is, look, don't worry about, I'm going to go to college and that's it, I'm stuck, or I'm going to go, that's it, I'm stuck. You're always going to have other options, I guess, because apprenticeships are jobs. So you started college, but then you saw this job opening for an apprenticeship.
Yeah,
and just go for it.
Yeah, what I'd probably say is I wasn't necessarily fully interested in what the actual job was. I more just wanted to get in the company, and I saw that as a way in, foot in the door. because it was call center based, and I worked in the call center for probably 2.5 years until I ended up moving down to Bromley and moving off the phone. And obviously it's quite a tough environment, quite stressful. So to sort of push through that, and there's lots of different people that work there. There are people that had been to uni that were still working there that had not been able to find jobs for their uni qualifications. I think one person had something in like philosophy, someone else had something in videography or something else, and they'd all, I don't want to say ended up, but they'd all got a job there, and that's where they took their life. As I say, I saw it as like a way into the company, and from there I sort of made it clear to my manager that I had ambitions to sort of build a career and wanted to stay within the company, and based off that managed to have conversations that led to different opportunities. That's
amazing. Yeah, and I think young people really need to listen to that very, very carefully, is that you can't just simply walk into the job of your dreams, or you walk into the type of job that you want. Sometimes you've got to start somewhere and then progress through. So like you said, manning the phones is something you have felt you had to do in order to get onto somewhere, so that's a really, really important thing. We've got a question in a chat now, which is fantastic. So I'm going to combine this with another question. So can you tell us, so what was the level of apprenticeship? What was the title and the level of apprenticeship that you did first with Direct Line Group? And when you went to interview, what sort of questions did they ask you at the interview?
Well, yeah, so the interview was over 5 years ago. So that's thinking back a bit.
Good question.
The first apprenticeship I did was a level 3 apprenticeship. It was providing financial services and a customer services qualification at the same time. And then the second one I did was a level 4, like an IS Business Analyst apprenticeship. In terms of interview questions, what did they ask me? I know nowadays a lot of the questions within sort of Direct Line Group interviews are specific to what we call our values. So you sort of be honest, do right for the customer and things like that. And they'll ask for situational examples of, when have you done this, or when have you done that? When have you demonstrated these skills, or different things? It's always good to have examples ready for interviews and, that sort of thing. Because I think lots of people can say, I'm good at this, but an employer's not really going to trust you unless you give some sort of situational example. And it doesn't have to be a workplace example. It could be in your personal life. You've resolved a problem or a conflict between friends or anything like that. All of those things, sort of add value. I can't remember what else I did. I think beforehand I'd done some relatively small, like free online courses, just to say that I had some knowledge in these areas, which are always a great tool because you don't have to mention them on your CV. And if you're applying for a role where they're kind of relevant, then you can sort of include them. I can't think of any websites offhand, but I know online there's loads of websites where you can do like free courses and get like a virtual certificate and stuff like that, which I'd recommend. Just coming back to the idea that you mentioned about, entering the company and not necessarily getting your dream job. I'd probably say that that's, very important with apprenticeships as well, because I think some people with certain apprenticeships, the salaries are kind of low, which can make it a bit of a struggle in the short term. But I think from my perspective, you have to sort of look ahead to the future and think, where could that lead you? Because ultimately you might be earning a little bit less for a year or two, but you've got the benefit of not getting any uni debt. So there's already positive there. You're earning money rather than putting it down, even if it is only 5, 6, 7 quid an hour, anything like that, then it's better than nothing. But also, as I say, think about where it can lead you. You can look on websites like Glassdoor, for example, that will tell you salaries of what qualified people get, and you can use that to your advantage when you move from an apprenticeship to a full-time role to negotiate and get your worth. I'm trying to think of anything else that I can really mention.
So what we call that in the trade, we call that labour market information, and it is so crucial. You don't have to worry about the term labour market information, but what basically is what Luke's just said. It's knowing the salaries, where the jobs are, what kind of qualification, all that kind of stuff, how many people are in that kind of sector. And I think there's another website called I Can Be A. I can't remember the exact, but if you just search I Can Be A, then I think they've got a really good labour market information tool, so they can look up the kind of thing that they're aiming for and do that. And the message, and that's the exact same message all of us higher education champions say. We say, look, it does seem like it's not paying very well, but that's because the money is going towards training you. So you're actually getting that benefit, and then you still get all the benefits of being an employer, so an employee. there's another question that's coming. I've got one more to ask you. So when you were doing so you've just said about your progression from a level 3, which is the equivalent of A levels, T levels, BTEC, etc. You progressed onto a level 4, which is the equivalent of like a higher national diploma, which is fantastic. So a question we've got quite often actually from students is the paperwork, like, because, you know, with GCSEs and A levels, you've got exams, you sit down in a room. Do you have to take exams? Have you got assignments? Do you get, say, by the end of the year you need to have done X, Y, and Z? You've got a form to fill in. How does that work?
Yeah, so I always found, first of all, that the allocated study time, so I think you generally get like 20% of your time, so or 10% or so. I got like a set 3.5 hours or so a week, and always found that was more than adequate to do the studying I needed to do it. On the level 3, it was mainly like coursework, you know, like situational examples, you know, when have you helped a customer with this, when have you dealt with X, Y, and Z, and filling in like documents about that. Not a huge amount of documentation, but there was some in terms of like keep a bit of a journal of what you've done and different areas you've studied. And I think it was quite structured. There was like a web interface, like a website. You'd enter it all in. As I said, it was very guided and fairly easy to do. There was, I think, perhaps 1 or 2 minor sort of quiz type exams, you know, multiple choice exams I had to do for that one. For the level 4, that was multiple exams. It still wasn't, you know, it wasn't like heads down massive written assignments. Most of them were multiple choices. So with my level 4, I had sort of like 4 or 5 different sub certificates. I think each of those were like level 3. So I had like a week-long course, and then at the end of the week, I'd do like a exam in the afternoon, whether that be multiple choice or, you know, provide some examples of when you've done this, or maybe they give you a scenario and how you'd solve it or answer the problem, that sort of thing. Then at the very end of the level 4, I had to do a endpoint assessment. Basically, they'd give you like a pack with a scenario, and you'd have to put together like a big old PowerPoint and a Word document over, I think, 2 or 3 days of like analyzing the problem. And basically, it was like a mock scenario that you sort of complete that for, and that went to the sort of exam board that then marked that. And then off the back of that, I had like a 1.5, 2 hour long interview with the like exam board, basically to review that, and then also talk about how I'd met different criteria in my role, you know, different evidences I'd provided as part of my apprenticeship and things like that. So there was an okay amount of paperwork, but as I say, I've always found that the amount of time my employer gave me within my contract was more than adequate to get everything done to a good standard.
And that's going to be music to a lot of young people's ears, because that they're not going to get away from assessment. And we will all tell you, everybody, right? Even when you've got a job, you've got a line manager and you've got things called appraisals and things like that. You're going to be assessed for the rest of your life. But you can quite clearly hear that Luke has given you some examples of the different approaches that have been taken via his apprenticeship, rather than just sitting down and having an exam. And I would love that kind of thing. Get given a problem to solve, and then you present your solution. Of course, you're using your job experience to say, well, you know, this was successful in the past, so I would go. Brilliant. Now, you've partly answered the questions already, Luke. So the second question we got was, how did you find the balance of study and being in a work environment? I mean, you've kindly partially answered that already, but it sounds like actually it was very manageable.
Yeah, so I always had people available that I could go to with queries that were almost, they weren't labeled as mentors, but they were colleagues that were more senior, that had been in the role for years and years, and were, you know, they were mentors in everything but name, basically. So they were there for queries and things like that. And as I say, the study time was always adequate. There was always more than enough time. As long as the only area that I've seen other people struggle in is perhaps them expecting their tutors to sort of almost do stuff for them. Whereas I think with everything in life, you have to do stuff yourself, and if you don't, it's not going to happen, because there's too many people for, you know, if everyone could get by doing nothing and relying on other people, no one would get anywhere, or everyone would be somewhere, and, you know, nothing would be an achievement.
True.
So I'd just say, yeah, those people that ran into problems where most of the time it was them being too afraid to ask questions, rather than them not having the people there to answer the questions. So they were maybe not they didn't feel confident speaking to tutors, whereas, tutors there to help you and answer questions. So you just have to sort of stomach it and get through it. I think
Brilliant.
confidence is a common theme in trying to get where you want. It takes, time to develop it and get where you want, but once you've got it, it's almost a bit perpetual. You start getting the ball rolling, and once you've built up that confidence, you more opportunities open because you're chasing them and you're seeing them. I think that's how I'd answer that.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And people wouldn't believe me if I told them that I was a very, very shy kid growing up, and now I'm doing what I'm doing and been a teacher and everything. So you can confidence is a skill that you can definitely work on. And I love what you just said. If you're not sure, ask. And so students now practice now, asking your teachers for help, your advisors for help, parents, carers, if you can, for help, right? Do it. Right, we're just going to see if there's any more final questions for us. So what I want you to do while we're just waiting for any more questions is think about if you could only give, I don't know, usually the classic is, what would you say to Luke of 15 years old? Yeah. I think that's the other one. If you don't want to do that, you can just give us what you think would be your top tips. So
a lot.
you got a lot. So which one would, if you could only have one thing. Oh, okay, right. Here's the last question for you, and it gives you a chance to think, right? So last question for you from the floor here. Were you excited for the opportunity to move with the job? So that's a really good question. Like, because you're moving away from home.
And when I accepted it, I hadn't even looked at like rental prices or anything down here. So it was, a big decision, but I knew that even if I was paying out like 75% of my salary on rent, it was worth the opportunity cost, because I knew at the end of it I was going to get compensated well and I'd have a good job that I enjoyed. So it was daunting, but it was very, very fun at the same time, because I knew that I was going to be leaving behind that call center environment and moving into a role that I would generally enjoy and make me feel, somewhat fulfilled. And ultimately, although money is a big factor in work, and without money people wouldn't work for it, you spend half of your life at work. So you've got 24 hours in a day. The average person spends 8 hours sleeping. You spend another 8 hours at work if you include your lunch break. That leaves you 8 hours left for your life. And even then, you're probably tired from work and stuff. So you have to do something happy. If not, things spiral out of control and you get unhappy, and then it affects your personal life. It doesn't go well. So I'd say money should be a factor, because money makes the world go round to some extent. But I think more so it should be, do what makes you happy and think about what you'd enjoy. If you don't know what you enjoy, perhaps try reading some books on different subjects. There's a very good series by Oxford University called Very Short Introductions. They're quite small books, only 150, 200 pages each, but they give a nice level of detail to get you to know a bit about a subject without going too in depth. And they've got, I think, 600 odd books on everything from criminology, pharmacology, computers, computer science, any subject. Those are a great way to get a little bit of knowledge and a feel for a subject, which can perhaps allow you to say, maybe I want to move into this field because I read on this subject and it interested me. And I think just, going back to that, what would be my tip? Just try things. The worst that can happen is you say no or something doesn't go your way. And if it doesn't go your way, you just try the next thing until you find something that does. As I sort of alluded to at the start, I didn't think I was going to get the apprenticeship because I thought it was too high paying. I thought it was aimed at older people. If I didn't apply, I wouldn't have got it.
Right. Yeah.
Even if the job advert, you don't quite meet all the criteria, just apply. Worst they're going to do is just ignore your job application. Obviously, it's a little bit different if they have like application limits. Although I only know a couple of companies that have that, where you can only apply for like one role every 6 months. But most of the time, it's just worth taking a shot, because you never know, they may not have had many applications, and they might lower their bar a little bit, and if you've applied, you're going to be top of that pile and first to get the opportunity. So just go for things, and I think probably do things today rather than waiting until tomorrow is the easiest way to sort of put it.
Yeah, and it's a great bit of advice, and everybody, it is difficult when you're in what's called inertia. You're just going through the motions, but if you can push yourself and do that, that's a great bit of advice, Luke. Right, okay, I am going to bring it back, because the people who are here and the people who are watching this or listening to this as a recording, they are going to want to know this. So what would you say, one thing, if you could only one thing, and a time machine would yank you back after the one thing you said to mini Luke, what would it be?
I think it's just sort of, as I say, do things today rather than tomorrow. There's so many examples, but I think the thing that will well, actually, there's two. I think probably the main thing is learn when to care about stuff and when not to, because I think a lot of people have one thing bad happen and they let that ruin the rest of their day, or they let that ruin something else. For example, it's an analogy I give sometimes. You're in a pub and you got a pint and you trip a little bit and spill half of it. You're not going to throw the other half out in rage because then you've lost the other half of your pint. You're going to, hold on to that and savor that. If something, ruins your day, someone's not very nice, or, something happens, although these, it's not great, but it's just, try and learn to move past it, because there's lots of things outside of your control that I think a lot of people worry about, and it has impacts on the other things that they can control and leads to them missing opportunities, or perhaps affects their mental well-being and things like that. It's, resiliency is a hard skill, but once you've nailed it, because I used to be, I used to care far too much about a lot of stuff that just didn't, like, I'd probably, debate about things until the wit's end on things that really, really didn't matter that much, because I couldn't, walk away from it or let it go. And I still probably struggle, sometimes I still have things that nag me in my head, but I just say to myself, leave it. It's not worth it. It's not worth, lowering yourself, or it's not worth ruining the rest of your day. I think that's probably the most important thing that I think, especially going forward, will be relevant to people and is a very good skill to have.
I think that's amazing, though, and that's going to resonate with so many high school age kids. So that's a great bit of advice. Well, thanks for joining us today, Luke, on National Apprenticeship Week 2022, and hopefully, no doubt, we'll see you again in the future.
Yeah, fingers crossed. It's been good talking to you. Thanks.